Welcome back to Living Umpqua, everyone. The UAP UFO rabbit hole. What a crazy couple of weeks it's been. We're going to go over some of the latest stuff. Before we do that, don't forget to like and subscribe for more of your most recent UAP and UFO news going down this current rabbit hole that we find ourselves in. We're going to cover the latest release by Skywatcher, and they have now what they say are 9 classes of different UAP. This video that they release covers a few of them and gives kind of a brief image of the rest of them. You'll have to go to the Skywatcher YouTube channel to see the whole video. Then we're going to get into some other stuff, kind of a back and forth between two of the kind of bigger guys. One in ufology, in this disclosure era that we find ourselves in. One, Dr. Stephen Greer, and one, Lou Elizondo. If you've been following this stuff, if you've been, interested in this stuff at all, you've probably noticed that there's been kind of a little back and forth going on between those two. So we're going to get into that a little bit more. Going to play some highlights of Greer's most recent interview with Jesse Michaels, which was fantastic. It's like a 4-hour interview. Michaels does amazing, like he always does. It's a great interview. I cut out just some highlights because it is 4 hours long to see that whole thing. Of course, you have to tune into the Jesse Michaels YouTube channel. And they'll have some other stuff a little bit later along that we'll get into. So for now, let's check it out.
We've architected, designed, and are building, and soon integrating this next generation technology. The Class 7 is the jellyfish. It's not the jellyfish you've seen on TV. It's a different jellyfish. We think the head of the jellyfish is about 2 meters in size. We think the tentacles hanging down are about 3 to 5 meters in size, varying and depending on which one you're looking at. You can see these stills are taken from different jellyfish. You can see this jellyfish, the tentacles look very, very long. On this one, they look shorter compared to the head. As you can see, the nodules on the tentacles light up. And again, this light appears to us to go from head to tail and pulse and light up the nodules as it goes. Also, sometimes it looks like an automaton or something with like an alien movie where it's got like the tail kind of hanging out, like it's seeking something. And sometimes it looks like it's a jellyfish in the sky. It seems to undulate as it moves. We have seen these take direct flight paths. Even yesterday, for the first time, we had 2 in formation. We've never seen that before. The Class 2 is the classic Tic Tac. We have had laser rangefinder returns on them to give us distance. And through that method and the optical zoom, we are able to measure. We think they're about 40 feet in length, and they appear to be traveling supersonic and hypersonic. A very interesting thing, which you'll see in the videos, is when we do see them, they're at the edge of our sensor capabilities. You'll see like there's striations around these stills, and sometimes it almost looks like it bends, almost like it's not a solid mass. So when it's spinning, when it comes out of the spin, for a second, it looks like part of it, like about a third of it is bendable and it bends.
And at this point, is it dropping rapidly?
Yes, the only thing that's changing is the angle that we're looking at it with.
The elevation angle, is that right?
Yes, and we're moving in a downward fashion. The system operator is having a very hard time keeping in frame because it's falling so fast.
Dropping fast.
The Class 5 we call the manta ray. It looks to be like it's written, a manta ray. It has round everywhere. I don't think there's anything straight or nearly straight. We actually went frame by frame on this because it was tumbling slowly and derived a 3D model of what we think it looks like. Here you can see it tumbling and spinning on multiple axes as it comes through the frame.
And you said this is going perpendicular to the wind and faster than the wind.
Yes, it was on radar. It was on imagery, multiple bands. And the interesting thing is the radar shows this vibrating as well, the same heartbeat signal, which is really a boost in our analysis because only UAPs appear to have the vertical and horizontal heartbeat. Manned aircraft balloons, birds, drones, they don't. They have a flat line trajectory and also a flat line radar signature.
Skywatcher will release full modules for each of the 9 UAP classes.
Fascinating stuff. Skywatcher is doing some pretty exciting stuff. I definitely encourage you to tune into the channel, learn more about that program. At this point, they're even asking for scientific minds to come and help them figure out what it is that they're seeing. They've got this classification program going on. It looks like so far they've identified and been able to classify 9 of them, which is interesting. If you go to the channel, there's more information about some of the other ones and some of the interactions that they've had, including one that was one of the classes of UAPs that prevented their helicopter from moving in midair. Is pretty interesting stuff, and pretty fascinating videos, I thought. Right? Tell me what you think down in the comments. Next up, we're gonna have some Greer conversation with Michaels and conversation also with Danny Jones and with Vlad. Vlad has a YouTube channel as well. I'm sure you're familiar with it if you tuned into me. Vlad's channel is awesome. He asks just the greatest questions, great interviewer. When I do have on more guests, definitely look to him as kind of a blueprint for great questions to ask and knowing when to kind of shut up. He's really good at that. All right, let's get into it with Greer.
Coming weeks.
Do you like David Grush? Do you find him to be an honest actor?
Oh, yeah, he absolutely, what he said about what he found, but again, he's secondhand. My whistleblowers are direct firsthand.
He has said that he's actually had firsthand knowledge since getting that critique. So, and I don't know exactly what that is, but...
Well, he's been pulled into some up, but the problem is he got attached to a gentleman named Luis Elizondo, who is mainly there to provide partial truth.
Just in case you might have missed it, I've gone ahead and, as you've noticed, pointed out every time Greer mentions Luis Elizondo.
If you put out some information and then attach the disinformation to it, there's a threat. We need to go to World War III in an alien battle. We don't have these technologies ourselves. We've never developed that advance. When I have direct people who've worked on, built, and flown the man-made UFOs. They're extraterrestrial vehicles. They're NHI craft. There are man-made lookalikes and facsimiles. And there are things from other dimensions that are really nasty.
Okay.
That are not extraterrestrial.
And you're saying if you...
But they're being deliberately conflated by people like Jim Semivan and Elizondo and others to gaslight people in Congress.
But wouldn't Jacques Vallée have said that too? Wouldn't he sort of say...
because in the 80s he got taken in by that organization.
Wow.
We are not going to tolerate people who spread knowingly or unknowingly disinformation that could lead to an interplanetary war and the termination of life on Earth.
Well, that'd be a bummer.
That's what that agenda is. Don't be naive. This is too important a matter to allow someone who's in there sort of telling half-truths. And this is why I will immediately separate with someone who commingles known false information with information. Now, if they do it unwittingly, it's okay as long as they correct it. If they're doing it deliberately, like Luis Elizondo, it's a bridge too far. Number one, he tells people, and has told people consistently, we don't know what these are. Now he's changed that a little because he has to. Then he said they're a threat to the national security. The implication being the NHI, non-human, are a threat. Which, if that's the case, then we're going to go to World War III in a Star Wars fiasco. And then he would also say, we don't have anything that flies like that. If you don't know, there are 3 major things going on. ET, man-made, and this weird stranger thing, sort of extra-dimensional spooky stuff. And that they're deliberately being commingled to obfuscate, hide the truth. You're going to get it. And then I had guys come forward who had actually been on the abduction squads, made to look like aliens.
Whoa.
And they said, oh,
You've
no.
met people who've, like...
committed those crimes.
Wow.
Yeah, and they feel terrible later in life.
Wow. That's wild because I have just started to braise the abductions subject. I do have one video on it. Make sure to check that out. But I've also heard that from a lot of different folks as far as the CIA being involved in abductions. And it's interesting to note that that really started in the 80s with a Jacques Vallée quote in a book. I mean, is that where all of that came from? I don't know. I'll have to do some more research on that. But it seems like I haven't heard of anyone saying that before then. So I wonder if that's the original source. But Greer then implies that Jacques Vallée kind of sold out to this global cabal type thing. So I don't know. It's very interesting. But this is one of the hard things to do is to pin Greer down. He definitely has his views, and they're very strong viewpoints, and I can respect that, especially somebody that's been doing it, for as long as he has. You probably have dealt with, so many different bad actors and misinformation agents that you probably get burnt out on that. Or maybe you are a misinformation agent. What the hell do I know? Okay, so we'll continue on with Greer and Jesse Michaels here. But I just thought that was really interesting about the abduction thing because I have heard that was a program, including from people like Richard Doty, who y'all know if you watch any of my videos, I'm just a huge fan of. So let's continue on here with Greer.
They want everyone to believe there's a threat from out there because the card they want to play that Werner von Braun warned about on his deathbed to my friend Carol Rosin was they want to create an alien threat to unite the world in this sort of dystopian, not a golden age, but a dark age of militaristic totalitarianism. So if Lou and his guys move in that direction, I got to call it out. You run this algorithm like they're doing it. Oh, we don't have any craft like that because they don't want the National Military Command structure to know that something they encounter, like Mr. Fravor did, was ours. This is how you start wars. This is how you get in disasters. This being mishandled by this president and Congress, because this is all going to come out in the next year or two, will be 1,000 times worse than the mishandling of COVID or 9/11. Protecting the human future and consciousness of what kind of world we're going to have, that's actually my central mission. Don't be impetuous.
Trying not to be.
Don't be impetuous. The problem is many of these people who are great guys get intercepted by people who are slick counterintelligence operatives. If they're denying that we have these objects, they're either uninformed or they're disinforming you deliberately. If they say there's a threat from these objects from outer that are not ours, now the ones that are man-made, huge threat to national security. If they say that the aliens are here for some malevolent purpose, there may be things from other dimensions that are quite malevolent, and those deliberately get mixed in with the aliens. But no, they're not.
Okay, so I added the David Jacobs innuendo. Forgive me. I recently did a video on abductions, like I mentioned earlier, and David Jacobs is a huge fearmonger. David Jacobs says that there's a huge alien hybrid program going on. He even stated at one point that there's a thing called hybrids. I put that in a quotation mark because he made that word up. It's not an actual word if you look it up. It's a word that David Jacobs made up. Since making my last abduction video and including him as a part of it and his theories, I did get some interesting comments about his history and how there's some accusations about how he may have misused hypnotherapy to imply and kind of plant ideas into people's minds. There's an interesting podcast about it. There's a book that was written about it that I was not aware of before I made that video. But now that I am, I'm throwing it out there for everyone else. And I want to thank my viewers for keeping me up to date on things like that. If you know more stuff about any of the characters in these videos, please comment below. And I'd love to hear it. I also have my email address, livingumpqua@proton.me. You know that's an encrypted mail. You can send me email there at any time if you want to share any information, any stories, anything involving the UAP or UFO field. All right, let's continue with Greer here.
These technologies have been operational since the late 40s. Everyone's fighting the last war. We figured out, I mean, Tesla, T. Townsend Brown, 20s, 30s, 40s. I mean, Tesla was killed in 43.
If you never heard of T. Townsend Brown, boy, buckle up, because his story, it really does, it reads like science fiction. Incredible character. Brown, he was a physicist who, back in the 1920s, started experimenting with high voltage capacitors and noticed something. He noticed that that they seemed to produce thrust, and he called it the Byfield-Brown effect. And he believed it could one day lead to gravity-defying propulsion. The mainstream scientific community, they largely dismissed the findings, but that didn't stop the military and aerospace world from quietly taking an interest in him, especially during the Cold War. Now, a lot of people believe his research laid the groundwork for secret propulsion projects, possibly the kind linked to UFO and UAP sightings. Whether that's true or not, you can debate that. But at the end of the day, the man was a true visionary that was way, way ahead of his time. Townsend Brown's work, as you can see, it still sparks debate. And it's been almost a century. So if you don't know about T. Townsend Brown, I'd recommend looking into it. Very, very interesting character.
Mm-hmm.
No, they're very interested. Unfortunately, Don Jr. got gaslit about a lot of this by Elizondo with false information. Joe Rogan has totally been misled.
Your episode with Rogan got deleted or something?
Well, in order to get his money from Spotify, they had to take it out.
Really?
Oh, of course. So if you're not corruptible with money, and if you're not somebody who's going to try to jump the shark by getting on the inside for the technologies, is what happened. That was Bigelow's Achilles heel.
Do you think Bob Bigelow has a warehouse with UFOs in them in Vegas?
No. That was all set up so that the $22 million that Harry Reid helped get to Bigelow Aerospace to research this would be, here's what that operation was. Send the money to that. Now, Bigelow didn't know this. He really didn't. He was innocent. Send the money to there. They get the money. The Pentagon thinks they're going to get a serious research effort. You might as well have opened the toilet lid, flushed $22 million down to the sewer, because that was a setup. They said to me, we didn't get anything of any value out of all those millions of dollars. I said, no, because the person who was actually directing that operation is someone who has been key to covering this up for decades as part of this rat pack of guys named Colonel Alexander, who, by the way, is the consigliere mentor for one Lou Elizondo. And I really think what Bigelow wanted to do is that he wanted to get on the inside of the tech and what was really going on with the intelligence community, but he wanted the access. So they find what your soft spot is. Where's your soft underbelly? What Wernher von Braun warned about, right? He said, look, the whole plan is to stage an alien threat so we can unite the world around this sort of fascist a totalitarian, militaristic sort of thing. That's what the drones were all about, by the way. I mean, Mr. Trump got that wrong. We know what that was. That was that was a psyop by the same people who are trying to be sure that when this comes out this year and next, that it's done with the specter of fear.
Are you saying that these organizations that are in possession of this technology and that control this stuff, that are keeping it away from the U.S. government, are they like their own autonomous government, slash military slash Air Force that is completely detached from any other world government?
They're detached and embedded at the same time.
And almost and more, arguably more powerful.
Oh, way more. Absolutely way more. Well, it's sort of like, if you remember a brilliant guy, Senator Inouye of Hawaii, who did the Iran-Contra hearings.
Right.
And he said there exists a secret government, shadow government, with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own funding mechanism, that's free from the law and above the law itself.
So if that's true, that's interesting, because I am kind of a fan of Bob Bigelow. I think that if he was misled, they did a really good job. I don't know that he has UFOs in a bunker somewhere, but I think that Bigelow Aerospace probably, definitely, most likely has some type of alien tech or access to, I don't know, maybe a library of alien tech or knowledge, whatever they have going on there. So that's interesting that Greer says that about Bigelow. But again, this is a guy that's been in the field, with proven, verified contacts at the very highest levels of the government. And so it's hard not to take what he's saying seriously.
These UFO issues, that's the crown jewel of this shadow secret government operation. Now here's someone like Mr. Grush. He was telling 100% the truth until he started telling tall tales that were being fed to him by Lou Elizondo about how the aliens had blown up villages in, I don't know, South America or someplace. That was
Elizondo told him that?
Yeah. So he fell into that disinformation trap along with the information.
Tom DeLonge, who's the co-founder of Blink 182 and who's worked with you.
Oh, way back when he was a kid. Yeah, we had.
Yeah. To the Stars Academy. That was the one thing that you guys worked on together?
Oh, no. That was Lou Elizondo intercepted him, gaslit him, used him, and spit him out.
Do you still keep in contact with Tom?
I haven't in a while, because once he got pulled into the disinformation nexus, right? Then he got convinced that evil alien, there were these good and bad evil aliens in a war, and then he got convinced, and then he got pulled in by Lou Elizondo into doing To the Stars Academy, and then he got run over by those guys.
Okay, well, one thing is clear. Stephen Greer loves Luis Elizondo. I'm totally kidding. But he clearly is not a fan. And I think, it almost sounds hostile. But I think that Stephen Greer, he considers folks that he thinks are contributing misinformation or disinformation to this subject, are just muddying up the waters and have bad intent. Whether that intent be part of this global group he talks about, this, group that's above and within governments throughout the world that manages all this stuff with UAP and alien and paranormal phenomena, including reverse engineered technology. It seems that anybody, that he believes is giving information that's not accurate is a misinformation agent. Now, he does mention if you correct yourself later, that he's good with that, because everyone, makes mistakes. Where he says his problem is when people continuously push out information that they knowingly know that they know is false. So it's something to ponder when we start listening to this new stuff. Again, I've mentioned it in previous videos. This UFO subject kind of seems to go cyclical, and they might change the names of things like UFO to UAP and aliens or extraterrestrial to non-human intelligence. At the end of the day, it's really all the same thing. It's just rebranding, right? And that is kind of worrisome. It makes you wonder if this is just a big, giant psychological operation. But Greer does say there is something to it. Now, let's get into Elizondo's response, because it's been Greer. I want to get into Elizondo's response to some of the things Greer said on another podcast, the Sean Ryan Show, which I'm also a fan of, as you know if you watch some of my other videos. But Elizondo has some interesting things to say. Let's check that out.
Stephen Greer. What are your thoughts on Stephen Greer?
I don't know him. So I don't ever usually have an opinion on anybody. I never talk about anybody if I haven't had a chance to meet them personally.
What do you think about what he says? Because,
well, where are the whistleblowers? And I'll tell you, isn't he the same guy they wrote an article about, if I'm not mistaken, who apparently was accused of taking people on a tour and then paying some dude to pay, like $500 to drop flares out of a Cessna? Anyways, my mom always told me if I have nothing kind to say, don't say it at all.
Ooh, shots fired from Lou Elizondo right back at Stephen Greer, essentially saying that at one of his CE5 events, he paid some guy to drop flares and called it UAP or UFO or NHI, whatever they call it. I think that's interesting, but I was only able to find one article by one guy who I don't know in a news outlet I haven't heard of. And they have some video. There is a light in the sky. Having served in the military, though, I can't say for sure if that's a flare or not. I mean, it's pretty obvious when you've seen them, when you know what they look like, what a flare looks like. It's hard to mistake it for something else. That's why the Phoenix Lights were so ridiculous. There's no way those were flares. No way, no how. I promise. And anyone, I wasn't some high-serving person in the service. Any grunt could tell you those weren't flares over Phoenix that night. Anywho, I'm getting off topic here. That's interesting. Some shots fired back at Greer from Elizondo. Let's see what else he has to say.
So I've never met the man, but it's nonsense. I don't know what to tell you, man. I mean, look, where are the whistleblowers? No, I don't watch his material.
Okay, in your world, who is Stephen Greer or types like him in your world in the military? How do folks look at someone like Stephen Greer?
We don't deal with him. ATIP was only focused on military encounters. And so, as a civilian, I'd never met him. I don't know much about him. And, I've never worked with the guy. I'm aware of his feelings towards me. He's certainly entitled to whatever feelings he wants. But, proof is in the pudding. We got videos released. We've got Congress involved. We've got an Arrow now, an organization that's been established. We've got whistleblowers coming out. I don't know what to tell you. People are free in this country to do what they want, listen to who they want. It is a free country. And I encourage people to get all sides of the narrative. I will never tell anybody, don't talk to somebody. Go ahead. Do you want to be my guest? You believe the data. This is the problem. When anybody gets up there and says, believe only me, that's a problem. What I think, it doesn't matter what Lou Elizondo thinks. What matters is what you think. Here's the data. My job is simple. Here's the data. Right. You figure it out yourself what it means to you. I'm not going to sit here and tell you weave some little narrative about, history. Look, here's the bottom line. You can analyze it yourself. There it is. You figure it out. That's the problem I have with a lot of people out there who prescribe narratives, right? Like, oh, this person's a disinformation agent. Do you even know what that means? this is my trouble I have with people. And this is why when people ask me my opinion, I don't really like to share it, because I've learned one thing in the intelligence community. You can be absolutely sure of something and still be absolutely wrong. You know what? Doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what you think. Here's the data. And then you figure out what this means to you, because this topic is a lot more like, people talk about, the military industrial complex, and they're trying to look, I don't want a general telling me how to feel about this topic. If it's a national security issue, great.
Okay. So Elizondo is saying, it doesn't matter what I think. I just hand over the data and you make sense of the data on your own. And, Greer applies a narrative. And so anybody that, applies some kind of narrative to this, you have to be cautious of. But here's the thing. Elizondo's delivering the data. So it kind of does matter what he thinks, because, the person handing over the data has control of the data, at least for a brief moment, right? I mean, that's the thought that went through my mind.
Human beings.
But people in the comments were saying, did he mean Stephen Greer? So why don't you comment on that?
Now, as far as the charlatans, I'm not going to give any attention to individual charlatans, because they already have enough attention. They know exactly who I am referring to. These are individuals who have made a cottage industry, a career of taking people's hard-earned money and deceiving them, not only deceiving them, but having them sign non-disclosure agreements to make sure they don't tell the world that they've been deceived.
Whew. Another shot fired by Elizondo. But I got to tell you, I don't feel bad for Greer, because Greer's out there dropping his name left and right, talking about him being a misinformation agent. Elizondo's sticking up for himself, saying, hey, buddy, you're not Mr. Clean yourself, accusing him of taking advantage of people that want to know more about this topic and really just kind of getting into their pockets and leading them down a road. You'll have to make your own mind up about that, but it's definitely a shot back at Greer.
And preying upon people who, for whatever reason, believe in them. People who say my narrative is the only narrative, and anybody else who tells you otherwise, is trying to hurt you. I have all the answers. I have the solution. Anybody who says that, I think is a charlatan. And they're dangerous for several reasons, because if they're lying to you about that, they're probably lying to you about other things in their life, their past life and their current life, which may or may not come to light at some point.
What else are the motivations of some of these charlatans, or potentially could be their motivation, other than financial?
Well, look at any religious charlatan. It's the same thing. It's a cult of personality. It's somebody who, for whatever reason, thinks it's all about them. Real, true, deep psychological issues, some sociopathic, to be honest with you.
Wow. I mean, going so far as to refer to Greer as a, kind of a narcissist cult leader, that's, whoa, that might be below the belt. I don't know. We might have to defer to the referee on that one. You tell me in the comments what you think. Next up is what I like to call an Oscar performance by Lou Elizondo. Now, if you skip back just a few minutes ago, he was on the PBD podcast talking about how anyone that prescribes a narrative to this, you need to be wary of, that he just provides the data. That's it. You make up your own mind. Well, if you go back in time to this video, here's Lou Elizondo ascribing a narrative to this phenomena.
Imagine everything you've been taught, whether it's through Sunday school or through regular formal education in school, or what our political leaders have told us. And yes, even maybe our mothers and fathers around the dinner table have told us, or maybe at bedtime, about who we are, right? And our background and our past. What if all of that turned out to be not entirely accurate? In fact, the very history of our species, the meaning, what it means to be a human being and our place in this universe. What if all that is now in question? What if it turns out that a lot of the things that we thought were one way aren't? Are we prepared to have that honest question with ourselves? Are we prepared to recognize that we're not at the top of the food chain, potentially? That we're not the alpha predator, that we are maybe somewhere in the middle? Mankind's been around for a little while. And for most of that time, mankind's been around. We've been smack in the middle of the food chain. We've been, we ate a lot of things, and a lot of things ate us. And about 70,000 years ago, something fundamentally changed. Something changed. And our species was instantly catapulted to the very top of our planet as far as predatory animals. And now all of a sudden, we became the most feared. We were the most lethal. That changed the entire global landscape of our planet almost overnight. What if it turns out that there's another species that is even higher on that ladder than we are? Do we need the social institutions that we have today? Will we need governmental and religious organizations that we have today if it turns out that there is something else or someone else that is technologically more advanced? Have we been wasting our time all this time? Or are we doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing? Does it turn out that mankind is in fact just another animal in the zoo? There's going to come a point in this conversation where we're going to have to do a lot of reconciling. Do we find ourselves in a situation where history may have to be rewritten? I think there's always fibers of truth in a blanket of lies, because that's what holds it together.
What if on every video I just referred down to my notes like this, and once in a while made odd eye contact like this? I kid Lou Elizondo, but seriously, boy, talk about some terrible acting. And I, for one, didn't buy it. I mean, maybe that's how he really feels and just wanted to get all of his thoughts down on a note on his phone, and that's what he was referring to. But gosh, to me, for such a serious subject, it seems like that's not something you'd have to take notes on unless you were, I don't know, trying to create a narrative. But you can't be too mad at me, Lou. I did plug your book. It is interesting, though, that the person saying the other person is creating a narrative is then creating a narrative and writes a book for sale. Who's right? Stephen Greer? Lou Elizondo? I don't know. I would love to see them join forces. I think that's one of the problems, in this community is the folks will spend as much time trying to debunk each other, more time trying to debunk each other or throw sticks and stones at each other than they do actually trying to get disclosure out there. Like I said, I'd love to see them actually join forces. As far as the Skywatcher stuff goes, that is fascinating, exciting news. I cannot wait to see some of their more videos and updates coming down the pike. I can't wait to learn more about the classifications, how they're summoning these things. More data. That's the data that I want. I want that data. I want to see what's going on there. Thank you again for tuning in to Living Umpqua. I really appreciate all of you for checking these videos out. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. And leave me a comment below if you have any subjects, topics you'd like for me to cover. I'd be happy to oblige.